Tonight we continued learning the talk of Avataraba to give us some insight on how we should process the current events that we find unfolding in our world. And we focused, going back in history to 1992, on the time and place of this pivotal global disarmament peace treaty and understanding the spiritual significance in all of the above. Please subscribe and share. Well, we managed to talk. I'm looking at the time. I'm like, what happened? But we discussed very important topics, right? So now we get to talk about what we're officially here learning. Of course, that's all we ever come to do is learn. So we began last week a talk of the Avataraba discussing or springboarding off a very significant peace treaty that was made in the year 1992, this global peace treaty, and looking how the Rebbe understands that peace treaty and how the Rebbe is going to explain the concept of peace and war as part of the process of the unfolding of the redemption. Because we want to take that and apply it to our world and what's going on in our world. So the Rebbe here was looking in February of 1992. There was this very big deal treaty that was made in the UN between the nations of the UN Security Council. So these are like the most important and powerful nations of the world. And this was such an important treaty that it wasn't only the ambassadors of these nations that participated in the treaty, but actually the heads of state themselves came to Manhattan, to the UN, to be part of this peace treaty. That's what took place on Friday. And then on Saturday, Bush and Yeltsin, the heads then of America and the former USSR, met in Camp David to continue these talks about peace, about disarmament, about taking the military and changing its use to more peaceful, taking the military budget and changing them. And the Rebbe looked at this peace treaty as the beginning of the fulfillment of the prophecy of Isaiah, prophecy that's actually written on the wall outside the United Nations, and they will beat their swords to plowshares. That's a very famous messianic prophecy in the future, in the times of redemption, and they will beat their swords to plowshares and their pruning tools and their spears to pruning tools. Like, whoa, that's very messianic. Well, the Rebbe says it's taking place now in 1992 in Manhattan. Because when we're making this treaty and we're saying that we're going to cut back on our military budget and we're going to use that money instead to help provide food for the world, well, that's beating your swords into plowshares. Because instead of putting the money into swords, you're putting that money into food to support people, beating your swords into plowshares. The Rebbe says that this is happening because the King Moshiach is already impacting the world and is changing the way the world views things. And this we see in the prophecies and we see in the commentators on the prophecies, that King Moshiach is going to impact the world and change the world and change the way the world views war. And this change in their perspective on war will lead them to beat their swords into plowshares, make global disarmament peace treaties, and use the money instead, agree to use the money to support people. And we discussed at length, the last thing we were really discussing was this idea of how the hearts of kings are in the hand of God, not meaning that anyone else is exempt from God's direct involvement and following very precisely God's script. It says there's a special something with these kings that have all this power, that God is very specifically playing with their hearts, so to speak, to get them to do exactly what he wants them to do, things that we perceive as so good, or something we could perceive as not good at all. But the hearts of kings are in the hand of God. So anything that's happening, we know this is, and we're not saying it's good, but this is what God wants this person to do. Good things come through good people, not as good things come through the converse. But whatever it is, however we process it, the hearts of kings are in the hand of God. So now at this point in the cosmic evolution toward Moshiach, towards redemption, the kings of the world, if they're elected representatives, if they're dictators, if they're whatever they are, but they are doing exactly what God wants. So this is where the world is, and therefore this is what God wants, and therefore these kings on their own, thinking it came from them, are saying, let's make peace. They might be thinking there's a good political move, this will be very good for my PR, whatever they're thinking. Whatever they're thinking, God is playing with their hearts and their minds for them to do exactly what he wants to be done, which is steps toward peace. Because we're entering the time of redemption, we're entering a time of peace. So the Rebbe said that to understand this more, we have to look at the details of the event. The details of where this peace treaty took place in Manhattan, in the UN. The time, it was a Friday, it was the 26th of the Jewish month of Shvat. The Torah portion of the week then, we have to look at all the details, because each detail, as we analyze it, it will more and more help us understand this issue. So it's interesting what the Rebbe is saying here. The Rebbe is saying that details really make a difference, that details really matter. That we could think that, okay, don't get so specific. Who cares exactly where, exactly when? Bottom line, they made a peace treaty. The Rebbe says, no. Yes, bottom line, they made a peace treaty, and that's very significant. But every single detail is significant as well. Have any of you had that type of situation where you saw how significant details are in an event? How the precision of the details really made a difference? Like you left your house then and not before and not after. I had something like this very recently. But it happens to me all the time, so I can't remember. But I can remember something very, 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 I can't remember. I remember I arrived at some place and I was thinking, oh, that's why God made me probably late, because I'm usually late. But it all worked out perfectly in the timing. I remember thinking then of the precision, I'm just doing what I'm doing, but God is orchestrating everything. So the specifics of when you leave and when you arrive and where you are and who you are with, and it all creates exactly what's supposed to happen. Thinking, the story Rivka shared with us last week. So she and her husband happened to be walking, and they happened to overhear this couple talking in Russian, and her husband happened to say, oh, Russian, you must know them. Go talk to them. They're your landslight, And what if that couple had come a few minutes later, or left a few minutes earlier, or hadn't been talking that moment, or, all these details obviously create what's supposed to happen. So the Rebbe very often focuses us on the details, because from every specific detail, the specificity of the details, we can understand really what's going on. So if we're looking at the details the Rebbe is focusing on in terms of this event, this UN Global Disarmament Peace Treaty, the place, the time meaning the day of the week, the date, the month, and the place in terms of Parsha, the daily, weekly portion of Torah, that every week is associated with the Torah portion that's going to be read that week in synagogue. In other words, this week is the week of the Torah portion called Shlach, send, the sending of the spies. So we're going to read that in synagogue on Saturday. But this whole week is the week of that Torah portion, which means that Torah portion impacts the energy of this week. So we're like, what does that have to do with anything? Very much so. So the time, the place, and the place in Torah, the Torah portion of that week. All of those are going to create the situation. So the place, well, we know where it took place. It took place in the UN. And the central place of the UN is in Manhattan. All right. So what? The Rebbe says, no, that's a very important place, because Manhattan is really part of the same city as the central synagogue and study hall. of the leader of the generation, meaning the Rebbe's synagogue and study hall, but he's talking about his father-in-law's, his deceased father-in-law in Brooklyn, in the neighborhood called Crown Heights, whose address is 770. That's the same city as the UN. Brooklyn, Manhattan is part of the same city, right? Of New York. So the Rebbe says that's not random. That's very, very, very precise. Why is that so significant? Because every place has a certain energy, a certain flavor. And the fact that the UN is in the same city as the central headquarters of the spiritual leader of the generation means that all of his energy is flowing over and being able to be picked up by that locale of the UN. I don't know if you've ever experienced this. If you've been in a certain place and you felt the energy of the place, positively, negatively, scary, soothing, but every place has its own energy. And sometimes if we're sensitive, and sometimes if it's strong, we can really feel it. Or sometimes we're just in a, let's talk about spirituality, in a holier, more exalted, more close to God mood. Like, why am I feeling that way? Oh, maybe because I'm in this place, which is a more spiritual place. Or the opposite, maybe because I'm in this place and it's a very non-spiritual place. Any of you ever had that experience? Any of you were in Israel and felt that like spirituality of the place, like pulling out your own spirituality? Any of you in any direction ever felt being in a place and seeing how that place impacted you? You picked up the energy of the place. I mean, the most obvious example I can think of is being in Israel and feeling the spirituality of Israel. But it could be, again, it doesn't necessarily mean spirituality. It could be any type of energy. But every place has its energy. And that energy impacts the people in the place. So the Rabbi says it's not random that they met in the UN in Manhattan. And we could say, why is the UN in Manhattan? Well, America's the most powerful country. So then why isn't the UN in Washington? Why is it in Manhattan? Oh, we don't want to get so political. Well, so what are you putting in New York for? I don't know. There's a very specifically in New York, because that's the locale of the spiritual leader of the generation. And since that's where the Rebbe's location is, that same city is where the UN's going to be. So when these people, not at all thinking about God and about the unveiling and racing toward the redemption, they're doing their own thing. Thinking about their voters, thinking about their popularity, thinking about how they will be recorded for posterity and history, whatever they're thinking about. But it's all coming from the energy of this place. And that's why they make the decisions they make. And that's why they make decisions that are in sync and in line with the unfolding of the redemption. Because that's the energy they're picking up in this city. Now, again, the Rebbe never says, me, the leader of the generation. The Rebbe never says that. It's always my father-in-law, my predecessor, my father-in-law, the leader of the generation. But you feel his energy. You feel the energy of God. You feel the energy of redemption. You feel moving towards redemption. And that's why you, on your own, decided to make such a peace treaty. So the Rebbe here is really highlighting the enormous spiritual significance of what we would call 770. Now, again, the Rebbe doesn't say my synagogue, my study hall. The Rebbe says always the Rebbe refers to his father-in-law as the leader, and therefore everything is his father-in-law's. So his father-in-law's synagogue, his father-in-law's study hall, but the central place from which Torah and light and godliness spread to the world. So somebody here has been, I know Vega has been to 770. Has anyone else here been to 770 in Brooklyn and Crown Heights? No, just Vega? Vega, what do you remember from it? What do you remember for your impressions?
It was very spiritual, very, very spiritual. The way people pray is like unbelievable, unbelievable. And yeah, you feel that Rabbi is still there because his office is there, and like people are there like when he was there. Like many people, they go there and they like feel his presence. And then I went actually to his house. Your friend, she showed me where
Really?
Yeah, yeah, and I prayed there too. I prayed everywhere. Yeah.
Very nice. Maybe we should take like a class trip. I have a friend, she
Right.
takes her
Thank
women
you.
on a trip to Israel. So we're not going to be so exotic, That would be really nice. We take a class trip to Israel, or we could take a class trip to Brooklyn. Maybe get a little bit of Manhattan in also. But yes, it is very special. It is very spiritual. I would definitely say for myself, it is definitely the place where I feel like spiritual rejuvenation. Like, like you're plugged in and you're just soaking all the energy in and like getting yourself full and saturated with godly energy. I would say I feel that very, very, very strongly in 770. And as the Rebbe's, not so much in this talks, but in other talks, develops this theme of how it is truly the most central point from which spirituality spreads to the entire world. Obviously, there's many places in Israel that are very spiritual, and there's obviously the Ohel that's very spiritual, and the Rebbe's house. There's many places, but in 770 itself, that's what the Rebbe identifies as the ultimate like place from which God's light literally extends to the rest of the world. So the Rebbe is saying here that because year 770, here's the beacon of spiritual light for the whole world. Obviously, it's impacting this whole city, and therefore people are on their own making very messianic decisions. And the beauty of it is, yeah, it's not just world leaders in the UN in Manhattan. It's people like us. We can go and make our own pilgrimage, and it's no problem. We could all go, open almost 24/7, and it really is a place where, again, I don't know because I feel it so strongly. So I don't know if someone could go in and not feel it. So we have Fagan who says she does feel it. So we don't know either, but definitely where you can really get a very big like charge of feeling very, very powerfully close to God. Now the Rebbe explains this idea might sound a little weird. Like here we are saying the central place of godliness is in Brooklyn. I mean, that's convenient for us because, hey, we're in Chicago, so Brooklyn's a lot closer than many other places in the world. But what do you think it's to be in Israel? Like, why is it in Brooklyn? Well, because that's the place of the Rebbe, but fine. But so why is he in Brooklyn? Like, why is the central place in Brooklyn, in Manhattan, in New York? So the Rebbe explains, this is an interesting concept, that we're going to go back, taking a little trip, 3,300 plus years ago. When we all, in a previous incarnation, stood at the foot at Sinai and we got the Torah, happened a few weeks ago. We were all there. We happened to actually be there, souls and bodies, because we are a reincarnation of that generation. So we were all there. Maybe we knew each other. Maybe we were friends. So we were all there. And actually, every single Jew that ever would live was there. We were all by the giving of the Torah. Jews of that generation were their souls and bodies. And any Jew that was not of that generation, because obviously not all Jews were alive that generation, not all Jews that would ever be were alive then. We were, but not all Jews are. They all came down as souls. So every single Jew was there to get the Torah. Now, when the Torah was given, you have to twist your brain a little to follow this. If you can think of the globe, well, the globe is like a ball, right? A sphere, a ball. And we have how we envision it, how we've been trained to envision it. North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, Antarctica, right? Our ball. Rebbe says it's a ball. It could turn and spin in any direction. Why are you deciding on the North Pole as the top of this ball? When the Torah was given, that's the spiritually top of the world. So let's take our ball, North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia. Let's turn it on its head, because we don't want the North Pole to be the top of the world. We want the giving of the Torah to be the top of the world. That's not Israel. The Torah was not given in Israel. It was given in the Sinai Desert, but that's pretty close. So now you're envisioning your ball, okay? Can you turn your brain? And the top half of the ball is Europe, Africa, Asia, right? Because the top is going to be the Sinai Desert, like right by Israel. The Middle East, right by the Middle East. That's going to be the top. That's where the Torah was given. We have Europe, Africa, Asia. And the bottom of the ball is going to be North and South America. You're following my vision, my ball? Yeah? Following? Okay. Well, what happens then, the Rebbe says? So we now have the top half of the world, Europe, Africa, Asia, as the sphere, the hemisphere, where Torah was given. That's the spiritual part of the world. And then we have the lower hemisphere, North America, South America, where Torah was not given, the lower part of the world. The Rebbe says because of that, traditionally, the Jews lived in what I'm now calling the upper hemisphere. Jews were in Africa, Jews were in Europe, Jews were in Asia. That's where Jews were, and that's where Jews served God. And in the lower hemisphere, North and South America, well, they really were, of course, weren't that many people. And then when people started settling, there weren't that many Jews. And then when Jews did start coming, we saw a very, very, very sad phenomenon. As Jews came to North and South America, unfortunately, most of them lost their Judaism. They lost their religious adherence. And these Jews that were all loyal, faithful Jews, generally in Europe or wherever they were coming from, when they came to North or South America, unfortunately, they very quickly lost their Judaism. And it's a really weird phenomena. Again, I don't know how familiar you are with it. It's more like the story of the Jews in America. But if you've learned or heard of the story of the Jews in America, that's what happened. These generally religious, observant Jews came to America and lost their Judaism. The question is why? Well, because they came and the sweatshops, and you had to work on Shabbos. And if you didn't work on Shabbos, you would get fired. But it's like, so what? Judaism has survived 1900 some years in very harsh conditions. The sweatshops of New York were worse than anything else our people went through all this time. Why did this cause so many Jews to lose their Judaism? So the spiritual answer the Rebbe is giving is because they came to America, because they came to the lower hemisphere, the hemisphere where Torah was not given. So as such, it was a place that was very far from Judaism. It was the half the world where the Torah wasn't given. So the Torah, again, envision our topsy-turvy globe. The Torah was given in the upper hemisphere where there's Europe and there's Africa and there's Asia. So those places are more conducive to living a godly life. America, North America, South America, that was really far from that place of the giving of the Torah. That was the southern hemisphere. That the other hemisphere, the hemisphere where Torah wasn't given. And that's why it was hard for the Jews to feel connected to God in the Americas. That's why this is called the lower hemisphere. And that's why the leader of the generation, the previous Avataraba, settled in this spiritually barren desert. The previous Rebbe writes that the first day when he came to America, now here, to put this in a historical context, he had survived the communists. You understand what a tough battle that was. He escaped the Holocaust. You understand what he went through. So here he comes to America. He's fought in the battles with communism. He's fought in the battles with Nazism. He comes to America and he sees a spiritual wasteland. And he says to, all these honorable people that came to greet him at the docks and were escorting him and making him these nice, welcoming, respectful ceremonies here. He was this big leader, a hero, a person who survived the communists and escaped the Nazis and, big, important spiritual giant. And he spoke to them about how America is not different and how Judaism is going to flourish in America. And one of the people told him, he said, Rabbi, and said it very nicely, but Rabbi, hairs will grow on the palm of your hand before Judaism flourishes in America. Hairs will grow on the palm of your hand before Judaism flourishes in America. Meaning, Rabbi, you've been through so much. You suffered the communists, you suffered under the Nazis. Retire. Get a nice house in the country. Pray, study, counsel Jews. Don't try to change America. Don't try to make American Jews religious. It's not happening. Hairs are going to grow in the palm of your hand before Judaism comes to America. And that's what he did. He dedicated the next 10 years of his life to bringing Judaism to America. And of course, thank God, Judaism has flourished in America. Well, why did nobody think it would? Why did so many people lose their Judaism in or coming to America? Because it was the lower hemisphere. That's why it was so far. So what did the previous Avataraba do? He said, I'm making my base here. I'm making my spiritual center here. And from this place, light will spread to the whole world. So the Rebbe says, it's like if you have this whole structure, you have this whole building, and you want to lift it up. You take a lever, and what do? You put the lever on the bottom of the building, on the bottom of the structure, and then with the lever, you lift up the bottom. And as you're lifting up, like the basement, the foundation, the whole building goes up. So if you want to lift up a building, don't pick its mid-center, don't pick its top. Go all the way to the bottom. And if you pick up the bottom, you're picking up the whole structure. So when the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe established his spiritual headquarters in Brooklyn, he went to the bottom of the globe, to the lower hemisphere where Torah was not given. And he picked it up from the bottom. And he said, when you pick it up from the bottom, the whole globe changes. So the light that's emerging is extending, lifting up, and illuminating the whole world. So that's the significance, the Rebbe says, of why the Lubavitcher Rebbe's headquarters, what we refer to as 770, is in Brooklyn, is in the lower hemisphere, is where Torah was not given, to extend and elevate the whole world. So guess what? You know why the UN is in Manhattan? Because 770 is in Brooklyn. Because we have this spiritual structure designed to spread light to the whole world, designed ultimately to help facilitate the redemption. Well, then the secular version of that, the secular version of the place that's designed to bring peace to the world, otherwise known as the United Nations, it's going to be there too. So that's why that's in Manhattan, because 770 is in Brooklyn. So now they're in the same city. So that's why the Rebbe says that it's very significant. We think, okay, wherever it took place, I don't know where it took place. Who cares? No, the Rebbe says it's all very, very, very significant. And similarly, the time. And if we look at the time, we look at the day and Friday, which of course is a preparation for Shabbos, and Shabbos is like the ultimate redemption. So Friday is like leading into that, and all these different connections. Like there brings a lot of connections. The idea of the date was the 26th. 26 is numerical value of God's most central name, that energy of God that creates all existence. So it's in the place of the leader, and as the Rebbe actually says, the Moshiach of the generation, where his job is to bring Moshiach to the world, creating this peace. Obviously, therefore, the UN, the secular version, is going to be influenced. On Friday, the day that leads into Shabbos, the eternal redemption. The date that's the 26th, symbolizing the numerical value of God's most powerful name, the name that gives existence, the name that will be fully revealed by the redemption. And in the month, the Jewish month, was the month of Shvat. Shvat, the Rebbe says, is the month of Rebbe. Now, why does the Rebbe say Shvat's the month of Rebbe? The reason the Rebbe officially gives is because the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away in that month on the 10th of Shvat. And of course, the day of passing of a tzaddik, of a spiritual luminary, is a very spiritually potent day when all of his energy is shining. So with Shvat, that's the month of Rebbe because the previous Rebbe passed away in Shvat. It also happens to be the month that the Rebbe ascended to leadership. It's also the month that the Rebbe's wife passed away as well. There's a lot of Rebbe issues going on in Shvat. So it's the place of Rebbe, Brooklyn, New York, Crown Heights, 770, the central synagogue study hall, and where light emerges to bring the whole world to redemption. It's the day of redemption, Friday, leading into Shabbos, the ultimate redemption. It's the 26th, the numerical value of God's most essence name that will be fully revealed by redemption. And it's the month that relates to redemption because it's the month of Rebbe, because it's the month of the passing of the previous Rebbe, which the Rebbe is not saying, but is the month of his own, the beginning of his own leadership. So it's really a time saturated with Rebbe, saturated time and place with redemption. So the Rebbe here is obviously highlighting the idea of Rebbe, of this leader of the Jewish people, as this very pivotal component in the process of bringing redemption, leading the Jews, impacting the world, the Redeemer. It's all tied in to the persona of Rebbe. So what have you experienced as your understanding of the significance of that concept of having a leader of the Jewish people? How have you seen that? How has that impacted you personally, or how you've observed it historically or with others? What's your take on that?
Cyril, can you please repeat the question?
Yeah,
please?
what do you feel is the function of the leader of the Jewish people, of the Rebbe, in Judaism and in your own life? What role does a Rebbe play?
First of all, I think he had so many initiatives that impacted the whole world, not only Judaism, but like everyone, I think, like, and the Chabad house is like everywhere in the world. And whenever there are like problems, the Jewish people, they know who to go, its door is open. Or in Chabad, because I remember when we in immigration in Italy, when we left, I'm from Latvia, so when we left, we wanted to go to synagogue in Italy, and they did not let us. All the no, not even one. We tried many times.
Synagogues wouldn't let you come in?
No, we said we are Jews, we are like immigrants. They only Lubavitch Chabad houses, they have open doors for everyone. And I think it's Rabbi, the leader, who made that, available for everyone.
That's so
Anywhere
amazing. I'm just shocked that a Jew
No,
would tell
because
another Jew, don't come to synagogue.
Yeah, there was security, and they say you cannot go, you're not like a member or whatever. I don't know, but they didn't let us come in.
Wow. Yes, the Rebbe definitely did that. He definitely wanted all over the world, as there is now all over the world, there should always be this Chabad house. There should always be a place to help Jewish people and non-Jewish people, um, economically, socially, spiritually, in any way. Just help people, to help Jews, and also to help and bring non-Jews closer to God. So I'm glad there was a Chabad house where you were in Italy. What city were you in?
Yeah, we were Ladispoli, and there were people from Chabad. They working with us specifically. Yeah, but
Wow.
like if you want to go to any synagogue, like when you walk on the streets, you can see synagogues. They would not let us to
Wow.
come in. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you guys did not
Did you? I was just
experience
curious. Did you guys do any of the rest of you have that experience? Did you try to
Yeah,
go to
that's what
synagogue? Were you allowed to go to synagogues? Were you not? Did you think of it?
Did you try?
Did you try? Rivka said no, she didn't think of synagogues. It wasn't on her list. What about you, Bella? Did you think of going to a synagogue when you were in transit in America?
Yeah, actually, when I was in Italy, we went to synagogue,
A regular
and it
synagogue,
was
and they let you in.
in Rome. They let us in, and it's beautiful synagogue in Rome, and they showed us everything, and I mean, I enjoyed. And there is a like street by the synagogue where the Jewish stores are, Jewish restaurants. We had dinner there, and it was like really spiritual for me. For Walter, yeah, we were just
Oh, so it was not
really.
when you in the immigration, right?
So
It's
was it
like
when you? What about when you
No,
immigrated?
not
yeah, I'm talking
immigration.
about when we left.
She's talking about when you were like Russian immigrants, not when
Yes,
you were nice American tourists.
Yeah.
yeah, tourist is different, of
American
course.
tourists, the Italians are going to be nice too. We're talking about when you were Russian immigrants. Did you
Yeah,
try to
that's
go to a
totally
synagogue then?
different.
No.
No. What about you, Miriam? Did you think of going to a synagogue then?
I didn't get the question. What was the
When you
question?
left Russia and you were way stationed in Italy or something like that while you were waiting to go onward in your journey, did you try to go to a synagogue ever?
In Lisbon, Portuguese.
In Lisbon?
Unfortunately, it was actually not. We're talking like a couple of years ago when I was in Lisbon.
No, we're talking about when you emigrated.
Oh, when we immigrated.
Yeah.
I do not. 40 some years ago.
You don't
think I would
remember
remember?
going, Danny. Sure. All right, Vega, I have this feeling you were very spiritual and you were thinking of a synagogue, and not all your compatriots at that time were. Don't worry. They've since thought of it and gone and done, each one done their own journey, but I guess there weren't as many people, especially coming out of the Soviet system, that they were thinking of synagogues. But I think your point is well taken, and I do agree with you. I was pretty shocked by what you said, but I agree with the general concept that the Rebbe definitely wanted to create a system, and did create a system, where there's like a little piece of him all over the globe. Because every time there's a Chabad house, every time there's a Lubavitcher emissary, that's like a piece of the Rebbe working through that emissary and helping Jews connect to God and giving Jews whatever help he can through the emissary, through the Chabad house. And as the Rebbe said very strongly in this talk, it's not just to help Jews, it's also to connect non-Jews to God, because that's the function of the leader of the Jews, is to connect all human beings to God. So I understand your sentiment, and I think you are correct. Anyone else have experiences in their own life or how they see in the world this concept of why we need a Rebbe, how we have a Rebbe, how it's impacted you or people you know, or anything along those lines? I mean, I definitely think we see this historically, that God always wants to work through a human leader, you know, like God sent Moses to redeem the Jews. I mean, God was quite capable of redeeming the Jews, but he sent a Moses because what do you need Moses for? You have God. Because God wants and has historically always chosen somebody as his rep, his mouthpiece on planet Earth. And that person's job is to connect the world to God and to give the world the messages that God wants the world to receive. And definitely, of course, in our generation where we see with our physical eyes, it's not like a big, you don't have to be a very spiritual person. You could even be just a regular spiritual person like Fagin, see it so clearly, you know, that, oh, the Rebbe has this network of little places where he can work through. So all over the world, there's going to be some place to help the people there. Help the people do what? In essence, help the people connect to God. Obviously, we want to help the people and anything we can do for the people. And obviously, you know, there's many different things, you know, physically, economically, socially, politically. I mean, many Chabad emissaries have many crazy stories, especially those that like are in the Far East and in all these weird places and difficulties that Jews wander into and helping the Jews extricate themselves from it, or in a place like Chicago, you know. Definitely there's wherever you are, the Rebbe wants there should be someone that's representing him. That's his energy, his mouthpiece, his tool to help you as a person, to help you connect to God, and really to help the whole world connect to God. And that's, of course, very much along the lines Rebbe is saying here of the idea of Moshiach, the Redeemer, whose job is to bring the whole world to God. All right, so I guess we'll stop at this point. To be continued. Not in my book, so I don't know where we were holding, but we did start off the class. Not talking about the law of Shabbos, but talking about the laws of bugs. So we did get a little bit of the practical law in as well, because of course, however much we learn and we feel more connected to God and we feel more inspired and we want to serve God more, it always has to translate into the practical deed. Like if our mind and heart are in the right place, that's beautiful, but it's not enough. Our mind and our hearts have to funnel into our actions, doing what God wants, refraining from what God does not want. And that's the bottom line way we finite humans and the infinity of God become one. And that's why knowing that practical deed to the degree of which vegetables can you eat and which not, and which only with a religious certification, rabbinic certification. Yes, God's found in the details. This is a vegetable that has bugs. This does not have bugs. This can be checked. This can't be checked. What does God care? Because in each of those details, when you do it as he says and refrain from it as he says, you and he are connecting, you and he are becoming one. And that's God found, as we said in this class, the significance in the details. All right, to be continued. Thank you so much for joining. You should definitely feel God's presence in your week. Thank you so much for joining. Be well.